On today's podcast, we're going to be covering forklift safety, so stay tuned. Welcome to Warehouse Safety Tips. You can find the show notes to each episode, links to information mentioned on the podcast, the social media platforms we're on, and anything else related to the podcast at warehousesafetytips.com. Now, if you're a seasoned podcast listener, this podcast is going to be different from most you listen to. It's based around exactly what the name implies, warehouse safety tips. And since the people in this industry are busy, we know that time is money and each episode will be as short and to the point as possible. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get to the podcast. For those of you listening that work in an environment with lots of forklift traffic, you're probably numb to what I'm about to say. By the way, we'll be addressing that in the podcast as well. But if you haven't been in an environment like that, as a forklift operator or someone who works among them, you'll be amazed when you see it. It being a controlled chaos of almost hive-like activity, especially in distribution centers with dozens or even hundreds of loading dock doors. Watching it is crazy, but if you could watch a couple minutes of it on fast forward, you wouldn't believe your eyes. It's an absolute whirl of activity. And one thing that allows this all to happen is safety. That safety is divided into several different components, and we're going to be doing a high-level look at some of the most important ones. Before moving on, here's a word from one of our sponsors. If you've ever been to or worked in a warehouse, you know just how important safety is to both management and staff. It's almost impossible to go 10 steps without seeing safety tape, angles, signs, and or safety products. It's these items that show us how to be safe and avoid danger in the workplace. And if you're looking for the best products to make this happen, look no further than Mighty Line. Mighty Line floor signs and floor markings offer the best industrial products out there. We're proud to have Mighty Line as the official floor sign and floor marking company for the Warehouse Safety Tips podcast and site. Go to mightylinetape.com/safety tips to request a sample pack of their incredible safety signs and floor markings. Now back to the podcast. The first component of forklift safety that you need to know, unless you're working at a facility that doesn't follow OSHA regulations or is begging for trouble, is that you have to be trained before operating one. At the very least, this instruction needs to include, but not be limited to, how to check the forklift truck for proper use, which is inspection and general maintenance info, operation and maneuverability of the equipment, safety and operational rules and regulations of the facility in reference to operation of the equipment, and load rules and requirements. Now, forklift truck training usually involves a license or some sort of continuing education and certification to keep it valid. The experience that you get in a training environment is awesome, but what happens when you hit that before mentioned hive-like activity of your facility? You really need to know, and most importantly, follow all the rules of your facility for both overall safety and operation of forklift trucks, safety, floor markings and signs, which might even include traffic light looking lighting, speed limits, load rules and regulations, fork height and or tilt, pedestrian guidelines, travel conditions, which is assuring whether your area is going to be free of debris, obstacles, or anything that could cause damage to the wheels or make you lose control in any way. Now, some areas might have water and or oils that are unavoidable. These areas need to have additional attention to assure that handling and stopping is under control. Safety equipment that needs to be worn during operation. This might include belts, harnesses, hard hats, etc., and your overall surroundings. Now, there's much more that could be covered on this topic, but again, these are going to be the high-level things to consider. Now, the majority of accidents and deaths related to forklift trucks could and should have been avoided. If you take away situations where the forklift truck's overturned, a driver was thrown from the truck, or someone was hit and or crushed, much less than half of the overall fatalities would remain. At the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned being numb to the topic of forklift safety. That's where a lot of the accidents are going to happen. You get so used to one thing that when something out of your routine happens, you don't have time to react properly. Now, this could be a change in floor markings, an altered pedestrian crossing, different height of an area, a new sprinkler system, or any other change that could alter your routine. Look at your experience as new every time, and when you get on a forklift truck, always try to make every day better than your last for knowing the rules and staying safe. Simply stated, if you're safe and pay attention, you'll have the odds in your favor. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Warehouse Safety Tips. If you visit warehousesafetytips.com, you'll find the show notes for this episode and access to all of our blog posts, previous podcasts, advertiser information, and much more. Thank you for listening to Warehouse Safety Tips, and have a safe day.